It's such a cool theatrical imagination behind this play. I mean, Martyna Majok is one of those playwrights. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Jacob, that's Jackson. We're excited to be back with you for another episode of No Script, an unscripted conversation about theater's best scripts. Welcome, Jackson.
Thank you. Good to be back. Good to be sharing the airwaves with all of you again. Excited to jump into the conversation today about Sanctuary City. Interestingly, Sanctuary City, the play we're talking about today by Martyna Majok. I recently interacted with this play, not sadly in person, but my in-laws went and saw this play, so we had a whole conversation about it recently, and I was like, hey, we're doing it on the show next week, so just hang tight. I'll have more thoughts then. So
Oh, I wish I had known that already. I would have loved to talk with them about it. I think this play is so cool. It's just so inventive in its theatrical mind, and the way that it moves through time, and the way that the story totally changes pace, and the world of the story changes it's partway through. I mean, it's such a cool theatrical imagination behind this play. I mean, Martyna Majok is one of those playwrights, the big time folks out there, and so no surprise that this one is awesome. Her play Cost of Living, of course, won the Pulitzer Prize, so she's in rarefied air, and every play I read of hers reminds me why.
Yeah, and boy, just looking at, not to steal too much from your context, just looking at the reviews of the productions of this, it's just been all over the place. So exciting to finally get to turn our attention to it on the podcast.
Yeah, it should be a really fun conversation, and it'll be one of those conversations where I don't know how exactly to describe in this play is so strange in some ways, in the best ways, that I don't know how we're going to talk about it, because it's unlike many other plays in how it's structured and what is happening, and then has just so much classic, solid, good playwriting, negotiations, dramatic action. I mean, I don't know. There's a combination of undescribable wowness to it, and just boom, this is solid drama writing at its best.
Yeah, there was just in the reading of it, and in picturing how to produce this show, or what it would be like to be a part of or even watch the show, there's this sense of awe of as you're reading it, of boy, this is how would they pull this off? Excited for the conversation around, excited to jump into that. But before we do, we want to take just a second and say thank you to all of our patrons over at patreon.com/NoScriptPodcast for being patrons of the show. Thank you all so much. It's been quite a ride. We're on season, I think, 12 right now. It's been a long time of doing shows, talking about theater's best scripts, and the patrons over at patreon.com/NoScriptPodcast make that happen. If you've been either a longtime listener of the show and are looking for a way to get involved in another kind of way with the No Script community, or if you're kind of just finding this show for the first time and jumping in, we have a lot of great stuff happening over on Patreon. You get access to patron-only posts, you get access to the scripts that we're reading. There's a number of different tiers of patronship over there where you can get different sorts of rewards and things like that. You can head over there and check that out. But just one more time, thanks to all the patrons over at patreon.com/NoScriptPodcast. And if you want to find a way to join the No Script community, head on over there, and we will see you on Patreon.
Absolutely. To those of you who support the show, thank you. And now back to the script.
Here we go.
Okay, so Martyna Majok, we have covered on the podcast before. If you are interested in hearing more about the context of her playwriting and theater making, check out our other episode on Cost of Living, where we do a kind of the full rundown that we usually do when we approach a playwright for the first time, but that's not today, so I'm skipping through that to talk about Sanctuary City itself, which was developed in part in 2018 at the Sundance Institute Theater Theater Lab, as well as several other development opportunities. Some of the folks that I know and work with here in Montana were involved in this play's development along its way, which is part of the reason why I know and love this play so well. It was produced for the first time. Its world premiere was in 2021, New York Theater Workshop. It actually performed out of the Lucille Lortel Theater. But more importantly, I think, to understanding its context, is that this was a delayed opening, to such degree that they actually called it a remount. It was intended to open in spring 2020, and of course we all know what happened in spring 2020. And so its life, it's actually sort of coming into the world as a play, was delayed by more than 12 months. And in fact, its world premiere has two directors, the original director and what they call the remount director, because of how far into the future that production then was finally able to open. After that 2021 run at the New York Theater Workshop, the play goes on to have really robust regional theater life. 2022 in places like Berkeley Rep, Arena Stage, Pasadena Playhouse. In 2023, the play was at Theater Squared, a company I know and love in Arkansas from when I was there. It was also in places like Fourth Wall Theater Company in Texas, Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park, the Alliance for the Arts, which is some kind of arts organization in Fort Myers, Florida, produced a version of this show. This year, 2024, somebody is doing it as their senior thesis at Yale, which I think is an awesome senior thesis.
Yeah.
A+ choice. And then the really fun part, and why I've been blazing through to get here, there are two great productions of this show coming up that you can see if you happen to be in Seattle or Portland. Seattle Rep and Third Rail Rep, Seattle Rep, of course, in Seattle, Third Rail Rep in Portland, are doing productions of this show in the weeks after this episode is coming out. This episode comes out in the sort of middle of February, March. If you're in Seattle or Portland or the surrounding areas, go see Sanctuary City. It is an unbelievable piece of theater, and I mean that in the most truly like honorific way. It is truly unbelievable. The play has catapulted to be probably one of my favorite plays for what it does in terms of its sense of theater in the space very quickly. And because of its just amazing life and this what it is being so amazing, it's the recipient of an Edgerton Foundation New Play Award, a Lawrence Hatcher Foundation Theater Development Grant, and its overall development was supported all along the way by the National Endowment for the Arts. I suspect that is in part due to Martyna's reputation, and then also in part due to the content of this play, which we've been lavishing praise on the form of this play, which I think is genius. But the content of this play is also so specific, so valuable, such a great voice for a community of folks that I think a lot of American citizens, especially and I use citizens intentionally to be clear, like theater-going American citizens don't think very much about, the folks for whom this play is part of their story.
Yeah. The story that it's telling is incredibly impactful and gives a voice to a whole bunch of folks. So very important for those reasons. I'm going to jump into the synopsis around this play real quick, just to give us some starting ground. I think this synopsis, more so than others that I have done, certainly, I'm going to rely on our later conversation to flesh out some of the finesse of this. I'm going to give you just a uber helicopter view of this kind of stream of scenes, and then we'll kind of get.
That's wise, because it's the play has so many. I know that we're jumping around a little bit, but I think it's interesting to say before you try to do the synopsis, because of the way this play is structured, it has so many scenes. Like I mean, I teach playwriting. I've taken playwriting classes. I am in playwright to some degree. Like plays have a kind of average number of scenes because there's only so long, and every time you change locations, you have to do a lot of sort of theatrical work or set work or whatever. There's just less scenes in plays. It's not as easy as flipping a camera shot. So films, for example, tend to have, even in the same amount of time, a lot more individual scenes than plays have. And this play, I don't think it doesn't feel like a film. That's not really quite what I mean. But it feels like a film in its like number of scenes for the first half. You're just constantly boom, 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 boom. And then you're not.
Yeah, slows way down. It almost approaches montage level in some of the scenes of the first part. Just like boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, I mean, that's the flip in the middle from boom, 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 boom to like what the second half of the play being one extended scene, which I believe is intended to take place in the time it actually takes place in. Like the second half of the play is like a unity scene, right? It has the unities of time and place.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All subsequent versus the first sections are all kind of all over the place time wise. So anyway, I'll give you a little bit of synopsis just to start off with the I'm going to think about these kind of timelines in this play in 3 blocks. There is kind of the early friendship of B and G, who I'll explain in a minute. There's the middle friendship of B and G, and then there's the late/end, possibly, of the friendship of B and G. Spoilers. So the kind of early and mid parts of the friendship for these two are kind of thrown together in the first half of the play. You jump back and forth between the early and mid friendship of these two throughout the whole first half of the play. Now, B and G are boy and girl, but they're just like just the letters B and G. So the ages of them are 17 to 21, and the description that is given to them is great. So I'm going to read it just verbatim from the script real quick. G and B, born in other countries and brought to America young. And then a third character, Henry, who I'll introduce later. Henry is first generation, born in America of immigrant parents. All have American mouths, all raised working class. B and G are both under-documented immigrants to America. And so the early part of the play is them finding each other. The early part of their relationship, G is kind of in a household that is to some degree abusive. Not necessarily her mother, but certainly the people that the men that her mother sees and who live with them. So she kind of runs away from home often and finds B by climbing up to his window. And they kind of have this safety relationship, this sanctuary relationship that they find with each other throughout the early parts of their friendship. B provides this sort of safe haven for her. They're able to share a lot with each other. They end up to the point that she's like sleeping in the same bed with him pretty distinctly and carefully. The script notes this is not necessarily sexual between them. However, it's not necessarily unromantic between them either. There's some blurred lines in there. But that's up to interpretation and the audience and the play's decision to make.
And I'm not, if you're assuming like the classic viewer, the ideal audience member, the whatever, somebody that is experiencing the play for the first time, sitting down and watching it, like that person. If you're assuming them, I think you're maybe, I think some people maybe disagree with me about this, especially folks other people that I've been able to talk to, so I'm interested in your thoughts. I think you maybe don't know. Like you don't really know. I mean, these are teenagers and they're sleeping in the same bed night after night, but it's unclear exactly the nature of their, like, will they, won't they relationship. To me, I mean, some things about their relationship are very clear. They care deeply about each other. They protect each other from all the various things that are going on. So it's not like it's not a fuzzy relationship, but I think it is intentionally, I think you intentionally wonder about parts of it because of what happens later in the play.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree with you for sure. You kind of wonder if stuff is taking place off stage or something like that, if there's more to their relationship or not. They certainly seem close. They certainly like live together, spend life together, and protect each other as a duo, certainly, perhaps as a couple occasionally. So there is this kind of like safety together in them, that they have chosen each other, and they're especially that G kind of runs away to B's room to be safe and to kind of get away from what's going on at home. The situation for G is the main through line of this early part of their friendship. G is kind of, they're both going through school, etc., but eventually G discovers that her mom has kind of done the work to take the tests and become naturalized as a citizen, and she's been kind of biding her time with this abusive person, this abusive man, to kind of get that done. And now suddenly, now that she is considered a citizen, they're moving out. They're going to run away while the guy is away, and so B kind of comes with them and helps them out in the move, and they get out of there. But notably, with G's mom becoming a citizen, so does G. That's kind of the big movement of their early friendship, is both of them kind of having the struggle of their parents having arrived here about in America, and having this struggle of underdocumentation that they're sharing together. But G suddenly is kind of thrust into this zone of, wait, there's a difference now. I am now considered a citizen. I'm going to jump to the middle of their friendship. There's lots more in there that happens, but we're jumping to the middle of the friendship. The middle of the friendship is kind of this late stage of high school for them, as G is starting to look at colleges. B is still underdocumented and trying to figure out a way for him to go to college and pursue the dreams that he has. But he's continually being stymied by all of these blocks in the road and things like that. As G kind of continues to talk about what she's going to be doing next year, they come up with all sorts of plans, because it becomes clearer and clearer that B's mom is going to be moving back to their country of origin. And he has to make a decision very quickly whether or not he's going to stay here and try to get citizenship somehow by kind of remaining in the country, or go with his mom back to their country of origin. In the middle of all of this, in the middle of all these changes in life, a plan is hatched. G says, well, I'm a citizen now. We could get married, and then you would be a citizen. And so there's this idea between them.
And I just want to be clear that's not actually ever said. Like, in terms of the dialogue written in the play. That is an assumed conversation that we get from the context of their conversations, but at no point is anybody like, here's the plan.
Right. Yeah, no, but they start like kind of having these drills between each other, trying to get the information correct so that they could pass the test. There's a lot of tests involved. Anyone who's gone through that knows, or been close to folks who have gone through that know. There's lots of catches and checks in the system to be sure that, or to try to ascertain whether these people are actually in love or not. And so they start going through those tests and things. And there's somewhat, well, some of the characters believe there is a commitment made at that point. I think there is some sort of commitment made to try to find a way to get B to stay as a result of G's citizenship. And then things slow down and time passes. The last section of the play, G has been away at school for a while, for years. And she is finally returned back from school. We find out that there's been some effort made by B to contact her over the last couple whiles, months for sure, perhaps longer. And he's eventually comes out that he's actually gone up to where she's going to school and tried to find her, and eventually just came back. But we slowly discern that this plan has slowed down considerably, that G has kind of put the brakes on for some reason or another. It comes out later on that there was some hesitation on her part, but also school was very busy. All of the reasons kind of come to bear, but also there's been some more complication in terms of their relationship with B, who is now in a relationship with his boyfriend Henry. And Henry emerges onto the scene. He is, again, Henry is first generation. He's born in America. He has immigrant parents, but he's a citizen. And he's studying law. And so he is kind of all about trying to figure out a way to get B to stay here in America so that they can be together. There's lots of plans tried. There's lots of different theories hatched, whether them getting married, whether B and Henry getting married is enough to keep B here, whether G and B getting married, but Henry and B actually being together the whole time is going to work. All around this goes over and over as this kind of like triangle forms between the three of them.
And Henry and B can't get married because of when this play is set, which is in the years after 9/11, but before what now seems like kind of a given, which was the marriage equality decision, which of course changed so much for folks who are, want to be in a marriage with people of the same gender. With that was not. It's almost sort of strange now to remember 20 years ago, at least for me, and I'm in a very privileged position in terms of that very clearly. But reading this play, there's a little bit of like trying to go back and be like, oh, there was for forever, for a long time, that was just simply not possible.
Right.
And that is a sort of shocking remembrance, at least to me. And that, again, that is probably comes from my position of privilege. That was never a concern for me. But for a lot of folks, it really was. And I love that this play is set in that period too.
Yeah, as like slowly some of the states are allowing more and more of it. You hear Henry and B kind of saying like, oh, there's a chance that maybe if this continues that there could be a zone or a time in which this could work for us. But eventually it all kind of, to sum it up very quickly again, eventually it all kind of spins out and falls apart for B as a result of kind of him trying to have the best of both of the worlds. Both G and Henry feel like there's no way that B could commit to them, as it's clear that G kind of continues to have some feelings for B, even though it's emerged that B doesn't love her necessarily in that way. It's complicated, but maybe not. So she kind of takes a step back for a second, and then when he chooses Henry, she decides she steps back, but then he says that the only way for him to stay is with G, and Henry's like, well, you're always gonna wonder whether or not you should be with G instead of me, so I guess I'm out. And so, long story short, by the end of it, B is left alone. Both G and Henry leave, and he's kind of left in the aftermath of this triangle, trying to figure out how he's going to either stay or figure out some way forward for him to try to reach the dreams that he's trying to reach. There you go. That's the helicopter view.
It's tragic. It's a very sad ending. Yeah, good job. That's boy. There's a lot there, and it truly kind of one thing that I don't envy you in doing the synopsis is trying to keep track of it all, because it's kind of intentionally there. The time moves so quickly, and you're trying to track over, I think, what is years, the
5 years,
relationship of these teenagers. And again, I am torn, I think, in trying to unpack how G feels and what she hopes for her relationship with B. My reading of the play is that B, well, first of all, this is very clear, is gay. And then the question becomes like, how long did G know that? And, if they were so close, she probably knew. But then some of her desire that she expresses for their marriage, which is it seems genuine and earnest to me. And so I don't know, that is a part of the play that I think is delightfully complex, and that I think maybe production to production you would see some variation in the sort of understanding of especially G and her, what she actually wants out of this. And it may be as simple as this is a person who she cares deeply about and wants to help. And it may be as complex as that's all true, and I know that he doesn't have some level of desire for me, and I know that maybe over time that would change, and I know that I like being with him. I mean, there may be many, many, many layers to it, and it's a part of the play that it's a delightful mystery, to me at least.
Yeah, I agree. And such a fun opportunity for an actor and a cast to try to come up with which way it falls, because there's so much. There's so many options. You just laid out a bunch of them. I do love this person who is just as even if it's platonic, I love this person and I want the best for them. I have the power to give them what they want if we can pull this off. So why wouldn't I? So there's that level. There's also the commitment to whether or not she loves him or not, if there's any sort of connection there.
Well, she loves him. I mean,
yeah,
and he
romantically
loves her.
though.
It's a question of like what kind of love.
Yeah, definitely. But then there's also this like also the levels to which, she feels like she maybe owes him something as a result of him kind of protecting her for all those years, the reciprocity there. So there's so much interesting bonds between the two of them, and which one you lean on more than the other would be so interesting to see emerge for G, as she, especially in those later scenes as she's navigating being in the room with B again after a long time away.
It's such a special acting challenge for the folks that play G and B for many reasons. The technical complexity, the memorization, the incredible blocking shifts, and we'll talk about all that in a second. But just these characters who have known each other for so long, who have a relationship that extends back to, I think, first grade or something very close to that. I'd have to check the specific grade they mentioned, but they met in elementary school. Yeah. And so the deeper, the longer the relationship, I think the harder that relationship is to make believable, because unless you happen to act across from a person who you've known since elementary school, you have to be able to spark a comfortability, a familiarity, an ease, and also specific. I mean, if you think about the longest relationships in your life, sometimes those people, you have conversations with them that are 10 levels deep, where you're referencing inside jokes from years ago with your eyes while you're talking about something from other years. I mean, the longer you're together, the more layered conversations get. And the easiest thing in the world is to act strangers opposite a stranger. Right. I mean, that's there's at least some genuineness there. But this kind of relationship is a real gift of a challenge for an actor.
Yeah, a deeply vernacular relationship in which they know each other so well as a result of what they've gone through. It's then it's such a fun move to then throw Henry into that relationship as well. Yeah. Because Henry and B share something that G and B don't, but also there's so much shared between B and G that there is this closeness that Henry has to watch, which is painful. But then whenever B and Henry are, sharing what they have together, there's something for G to watch, which is painful, and then there's B stuck between all of them trying to switch between modes. It's just like this perfect triangle kind of chaos catalyst seeing that closeness all together.
No, I think that's a really interesting point. Like, all parts of this trio of people, each duo within the trio has something that the other does not. Yeah. B and Henry have a sexual relationship that I think it plays very clear that G and B don't have. Once you learn that, I know we discussed earlier whether that's confusing, but it becomes clear that that was not the case later in the play. The question is just whether you think that's the case when that moment comes, during the first part of the play. But once you get into this latter meat of the play, it becomes, I think, very clear that that is not part of their relationship. And so B and Henry have that. G and B, as you described, have this incredible history, something that it would be hard for a new or new-ish romantic partner to see. And then G and Henry have their citizenship. Yeah. Have a knowledge that they are secure in this country in a way that B does not have, and that ultimately he is very much left out of at the end of the play.
Yeah, it's interesting to see like when those shifts happen, like which duo emerges on top, because there's a lot of negotiation around which duo has power at a given time, and the different power dynamics that are at play make it for such an interesting, sometimes paradoxical power, other times really clear modes of power. So it's really interesting to kind of feel the ebb and flow, especially of the argument that emerges towards the end of the play as to which option B is going to try to get citizenship. It kind of becomes almost G pitching the idea to continue in the plan that they had for a while, and Henry kind of is trying to show you guys aren't ready for this. You don't have it together. Henry's trying to like drill them on what's going on, and so yeah, it's just interesting to see the way that they use their different dyads to try to affect the outcome of their relationships.
And the play is structured so that I think the audience has that feeling of Henry being an outsider in a really brilliant way, because we spent up until that point so much time, I mean, actual literal time, like sitting in the chair watching the play with B and G. But then also, like, the amount of time that play up to that point is supposed to represent, which is these years of their hopes and dreams and the evolution in their family and their power and their hopes for the futures. You've been with them across years of their life, and you know this couple, and I just say couple very loosely. Again, I don't know that it's a romantic couple, but they're a pair, you know, they're a team. They're deep friends who care deeply about each other. You know them. And then this guy just walks in.
Yeah.
And he feels like I have access to an early draft of the play because of some of the development that has been done around the play in this area. And there was a time where Martyna Majok called for that character to be a secret from the audience, to not appear in the program or the advertising.
That's
and
interesting.
that does not appear in the published edition that we've checked out. She's moved on from that idea, I guess. But I mean, that was the original version of the script that I read, and it made a ton of sense. I mean, I had thoughts, of course, as a theater maker about like how practical that is, but in terms of what she was trying to do theatrically and in the story, that was very much right in line. Like it is surprising when he walks in, because this has every feeling of being a two-hander, a deep relationship based character negotiation two-hander, like the best ones are. And then it's not.
Yeah. And it's like almost disquieting as soon as a third person shows up on stage. And I think the thing that like, so other than just like the structural time we've spent with the characters, etc., the way that first half goes is so we kind of mentioned that we will talk about it, and this feels like a good time to talk about it. It's so interwoven. The two timelines are smashed together with frequent scene changes over and over, and that's jarring initially to try to track when time is happening and all that stuff. Just in the reading of it, I imagine it's even harder. It'll just such a challenge. So many things that I'm excited to talk about this. Anyway, these the two characters are moving between scenes, and it feels like we've, at least in the reading of it, we just sort of like adapt to knowing what's happening with these two characters and loving them, loving that they're each other's sanctuary. And then something changes. The pace slows down. A new character shows up, and it's this deeply disorienting experience for what we've done in the first half.
Well, everything changes between the first part and the second part. Now, you're noticing that maybe listeners that we're trying to dance around Act 1 and Act 2, because that is not how the play is written. There's
First
no
half,
acts. There's no scene
half.
Numbers. I'm not totally sure. I think maybe just for the fluidity of the story, maybe just for I don't know. It's not written as if it's Act 1 and Act 2, but it is sort of structured that way. But everything changes between that first part and the second part. So the first part of the play, which is roughly half, is these series of very short scenes, sometimes to the point where there are 5 or 6 to a page. and they're divided by these sort of star arrangement in the script. I won't spend too much time on there other than to say it's not like it goes to a new page and then says next scene, new page, next scene. It's just like the dialogue, the stage directions, and then there are these stars that break up and say, now you've shifted to a different point in time. And that all these different scenes, again, 5 or 6 to a page sometimes, span this several years of this first part that we see of their friendship relationship. But again, we know that it's gone back in time. What are they, 17? How old are you in elementary school? 6 or 7?
Yeah.
So like maybe 10 years at least.
Yeah.
It's like a decade-long relationship before that. And then so all these very short scenes, and they're the plot that you've described, Jackson. And the play starts by setting it up with both of their problems so well. The first 2 very short scenes set up that G lives in this home where there are abusive men around all the time, especially one particular abusive man who her mother can't seem to leave. And then the very next scene is B saying, my mother is going back to our home country and I have to decide to stay here by myself or to go back with her, and what am I going to do? So they set up those 2 problems right away, and then over the course of the rest of this first half, many things happen. But so that's like lots of short scenes, a lot of time, flashes, tons of repetition. Like there's this really great scene where they're both packing, but it's totally different contexts for the packing. I mean, really brilliant stuff. And the design of it is that it's totally spare. There's it's an empty stage. There's no props. There's literally, she specifically, you can only use 2 props in the first part of the play, the engagement ring and a lighter for this really brilliant repetition series of scenes about a birthday cake and a celebration cake.
Yeah. No, and so all of those scenes, man, they just like flow rapid fire between all of them.
So fast,
so fast, and not only so it'd be another thing too if there was some like I remember the first time I read this, I was like looking at the stars between the scene to see if there was some replicating pattern of like trying to give me a hint of when the scene was taking place. Like if it was like scene 1 and then like 6 scenes later you got scene 1 again, so you knew you were in the same scene or something like that. It's not that. It is this just like this blitz, this rapid fire of all these scenes thrown together, and just to marvel for a second. This is one of those sort of awe moments of mine. I was like, just as an actor trying to approach those and know when you are as you are saying these scenes, some of them which are repetitious and very intentionally so. What a challenge, what a fun challenge, and then also what an experience for both the actor and the audience to try to learn these characters as you're learning this time hoppiness between 2 distinct moments, but multiple scenes within those 2 distinct moments.
And there's evolution in the characters' lives. There's conflict. There's in a kind of beautiful end cap scene where B and G are at the bus. She's about to go off to college, something she has access to because she got citizenship and therefore can get like scholarship money and such. And she doesn't want to go. And he finally like gets the ring because they've been talking about this marriage for him to get his citizenship. Beautiful. And then part 2, act 2, whatever, the second part of the show. And we moved ahead several years in time. I think that's in stage direction, so you have to figure out exactly, I think that's communicated clearly through the characters' dialogue. But what's so crazy is not only does it then slow down to like real time, right? The rest of the play is one scene. It's probably a half an hour or so, and it's that amount of time in real life. But also the way the stage looks is changed. I'm not sure that you have to do this, but the description is that now Martyna Majok gives you a whole apartment with clutter, with set. Now, she does say this is what we may or may not see. So, I don't know that you have to do this, but I think the implication of the script is that you go from an empty stage to like kind of a box set, like an apartment set with set dressing, with pictures on the wall and props, and there's a wine bottle and there's people's coats. The stage is now cluttered, and now it's like a more traditional is maybe not the word I want, but it's a more like familiar play environment. And so if you're going to do that, and I think that's the implication of the way the script is written, I mean, that is a massive shift in storytelling all at once.
Yeah, suddenly you're kind of thrust into a different type of story and you're trying to engage it. It almost makes it like in sort of the second approach to it, the second read of it, or maybe a second watch of it. It's fun to think about that whole first half as what is banging around in the characters' heads as they engage the second half. This like very visceral memory, imagination, all the subtext of B&G is those first scenes. All of that is just like is playing on repeat in their minds as they engage this very different feeling scene. And in that way, that sort of like flowing between memories back and forth, that's the way memory happens in a conversation, especially one of contention. You're being swayed by different moments of your memory of a person over and over as different ones flood into your mind, and so you're kind of free associating between multiple times, multiple places, multiple interactions. And so it's just interesting to think about that too as a way that as they enter a scene that I agree at least has the opportunity to look different from a theatrical technical perspective. We're no longer moving between what I assume are basically light changes to help us discern a slight variation in scene or something like that on a bare stage, to now we're distinctly different. There's an apartment. There's at least the feel of an apartment needs to be evoked, staying in one place, one time, and new people. All of that is just so starkly different from the first part.
Yeah, and because it's so uniquely structured like that, there's almost there's almost the feeling of like the play starts now.
Yeah,
right. Like I get if you're trying to put this in the old like Freytag plot analysis, right? Like establishing the world, inciting incident, rising action, climax, falling action, denouement. This play obviously is not that. Let me be clear.
Right.
But if you were trying to, would the inciting incident be G showing back up after being away for years to try to convince him to do this again? Would it be the thing that happened a month ago where he called, and my understanding was clear with Herb, there's a lot there, that he had been kicked out of the apartment by this guy, but that of course means that he's in a relationship with a guy, which seems like it's new information to be. Like, was that the inciting incident? I don't know. I mean, it's hard to, because the two parts of the play are so different in storytelling method, you have the feeling of two stories, and it's not like it's unclear how they're supposed to fit together. It's very clear. But it is a little like, what is the story? And where does it start? Like, is the inciting incident in part one when they decide to try to do this marriage thing? Is it when she goes to college? Is it, I don't know. Like, what's the spine?
Yeah. What is the story we're engaging? And I think where you choose to set that inciting moment, there's a lot of valid choices. If you set that inciting moment with G climbs up the drain pipe and climbs into B's bedroom, it's a story about a friendship. It's a story about these two's friendship, and it's rises and falls over 5-6 years, longer than that, over 15 years. If you start it where this kind of plan is hatched to kind of bring them together, it's a story of almost a tragic story of trust and how friends can trust each other but also let each other down. If you start it at the moment when they walk into the apartment, it's two friends who loved each other once meet each other again for the first time in years, something like that. That's a reductionist stereotype. But it is interesting how many of those are interesting and I think pretty valid choices based on the script that is given.
Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. And what complicates it is that so much is unknown. And I think that is what's delightful about the play. Every time I read it, I think something different about it. Not my opinion of it, but like I think something different about parts of the story. like what actually happened in certain spots. And you're right, it's about friendship and it's about trust. And I mean, we should say it's about citizenship and the power of citizenship, because ultimately this second part, as we've said, one of the major like powers of this scene is the power of G and Henry to decide the fate of B themselves, and that he lacks power in that moment, and it doesn't end the way you hoped.
Yeah. As much as both out of love try to give him the power to choose, it is heartbreaking in the end to see them take away that power. You know, and it's for difficult reasons, you know, it's hard to say that anyone is unjust in their reasoning because it's just so complicated, but also that power that at least they tried to give initially, it's ultimately theirs to take away as well, and they do at the end of the play, and that's super painful.
Yeah, it is. And he's left alone in the apartment. I mean, it's just, I think that so much of the way that the first half of the play is negotiated in the second half of the play is really brilliant. So, as they go back through the story of their lives, now with Henry in the mix, it's so fascinating to be an audience member and you've been with them through these things. Like, you've actually seen them happen on stage. She's come in the fire escape night after night after night, and you've been part of that. And then Henry's in the room, and now you have to watch them tell that story with someone else there. That is so, I mean, in terms of like interpersonal dynamic, in terms of a playwright's job being to set up complex situations between people, it's brilliantly complex. We are with them in having experienced this thing, and then we are with them in like, how do we talk about this thing that we've experienced? In fact, this thing that we've practiced talking about.
Right.
For pages and pages and pages. But the minute someone else comes in the room, especially someone who has all this wrapped up in their relationships, it totally changed. Like, they start to talk about the fire escape and how she would come in through the fire escape, which was a big part of the first part of the play, and is like, in the first part of the play is this beautiful, like, they're protecting each other, they're trusting. It's like, it's the stuff teenage romance is made of, you know?
Right.
and again, I don't know about it being romantic, but it is. I mean, that some of what Martyna Majok has done is like pulled on this sort of trope or this image of the teenager sneaking in through the fire escape. And you've been with them in that. And then they start to talk about it with Henry there, and it's just like totally different. They end up kind of having to lie about it, and it is brilliant to see how stories change depending on who's in the room. I think it's an appreciated part of this play. Amidst all the great theatrical imagination, there is this great interpersonal reality.
And its ability to sort of by association call out the injustice of having to do this at all, because we're experiencing the awkwardness of the two of them sharing this story about them being a couple in front of Henry, who is in a relationship with B. So there is this uncomfortability that we're feeling as a result of the given circumstances of their relationship. But underneath it all is this, and they have to go to like a customs agent and or some governmental agency and do this same thing. They have to try to generate this story for them as well. And so we get this uncomfortability, and by association are invited to also think about the injustice of this process that they're forced into.
I'm not sure that I realized this about like how I think about the play until you said that. But and I don't want to say quite the wrong thing here, but I do think that Martyna Majok's imagination of this play, G and B are, I think, easily like great candidates for the, like, they could get married. I mean, I do think that I think part of the audience experience, as we said, is like some belief that like, yes, they're getting married for his citizenship, but like they might also like love each other and just get married. They've known each other forever. They have this incredibly interwoven life history. She used to come in through the window all throughout their teenage years, and they'd sleep in the same bed, and they'd wake up and have breakfast together. Like, their story works so well as a cover story that we almost get convinced by the cover story. And to me, the hardest person in the world to tell that story in front of is Henry.
Yeah.
I mean, if you just have to walk into a like an agent or whatever and say like, yeah, she used to come over every night, and we were teenagers. What do you think happened, right? Like, but then trying to contextualize that complex relationship in front of this person who you're trying to convince actually that's not the case. This story that seems so true and seems so straightforward is actually not true. Yes, she did sneak through my window every night, and we slept in the same bed for a lot of our teenage years, but I swear, there's some brilliance in like, it seems like it's set up for it to go so well because their story makes so much sense that then the most complex person you could throw in the mix is not somebody you have to convince the story is true. It's somebody that you have to convince that story is not true.
Right. While asking them to help you try to make it true for something. Yeah, it is. It's so many levels.
If you think like on the most meta level about that part of the play, you've crafted what amounts to a lie that seems so true that the hardest thing in the world is to convince somebody it is a lie. I mean, that's just brilliant story structure. It's unbelievably intelligent for that to be the context of the story. I mean, it's like you get to that part of the play and you're like, I think it is going to be very difficult to convince him that you... I mean, it's like, yeah, well, boy, you know what? I also thought they maybe were sleeping together.
Yeah. I guess not. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I just can't rave enough about all of the it's such a smart story, and it's heartbreaking and emotional, and it's so much about power and about all this important voice, and it is also just like from the mind of a master storyteller, and you just are in awe of how this story is laid out for you and the unexpected twists and turns.
Yeah, there's so many facets to it, so many pockets, so many ways that the two characters are interacting, and it's just it just makes for a great time and great conversations about it.
I'm one of the classes that I'm teaching this semester. We're talking and thinking about story structure and playwriting structure, and we've been reading an old playwriting textbook called Backwards and Forwards by David Ball. That doesn't matter, other than to say one of the ways he suggests analyzing a play is to look at it backwards, because at any moment it feels like characters have an infinite number of choices. But when you get to the end of a play, you look back and it's only through the exact, each step requires the choice before it to happen. And this play is such a good example of that, because if, for example, G and B were sexual romantic in their relationship, then the second part of the play is not the same, because then they just would be a couple getting married, and there would be no risk. And so it's only through looking at this play backwards that you go, the only way we got here is by this exact sequence of personal decisions of these specific characters. If they were just both a straight couple in love through their whole teenage lives, problem solved. The problem is created by these specific people making these specific choices. And at the end of the play, you look back and you're like, this is the only way this could have gone.
Yeah.
Given this specific scenario. It's just so smart.
Yeah, super just on an analytical level, it's so fun to dig into it on an emotional level. There's so much just deep heart story going on, so much pain, so much love. I imagine a lot of that pain and love comes out more in the live show than so it already comes through in the reading of it. But I imagine that the sort of love and the care that these characters all have for each other comes out viscerally. So we would love to keep chatting about it with you. We're coming down to the end of the time for the show, but if you have the chance to go see any of those plays out west, and want someone to chat with about, we'd love to be those people. If you have been in this play, read this play, watched this play before, we'd love to keep talking about Sanctuary City with you. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at the username @NoScriptPodcast. We also have a Gmail, noscriptpodcast@gmail.com. Find us on any of those sites. We'd love to keep talking about this play with you.
Absolutely. If you enjoyed this conversation, any of our other conversations, please recommend us to your family, your friends, anybody you know that likes theater, talking about stories, just listening to people like rave crazily about some play you've never read. That's us.
That's us.
Send them our way. They'll have fun. We had fun. They can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, YouTube, Podbean, all the places you find podcasts. We're there. Like us on Facebook, and a link to the new episode appears every Monday when we publish.
Hey, we're coming at you with another script next Monday, as Jacob just said. But until then, I'm Jackson, and that's Jacob. Thanks for listening to No Script, the podcast.